All right. Hi guys, I'm Mike. I'm with Projetech, and we'll be kind of just here for any help anyone needs. Anyone out there needs help, or any of the presenters. I'm sure we're gonna have a few more people coming in as we get started, but I just wanted to get the introductions kind of out of the way. You guys will be hearing from Jim Kirkpatrick and Adam Olson, both with Duke Energy. They have their bios listed in the Mug Summit app. They both have lengthy experience doing all sorts of stuff with Maximo. And then we also have Mack Parrott coming up. He works at Projetech with me and has personally taught me an awful lot about Maximo. So I know you guys are in for a good treat. You guys ready to go? Ready. All right, here's Jim.
As mentioned, I'm Jim Kirkpatrick with Duke Energy. I think most people recognize Duke Energy as the largest utility in North America. The part of the organization that Adam and I are with is with Duke Energy Renewables, which is part of the commercial business. So what we do is a little bit different. Okay, I'm being tricked already.
There we go.
Thank you. So some of the topics that we're going to be discussing is what's important to Duke Energy Renewables, some of the customizations that we've made to Maximo. One is some changes that we've made that allow us to capture some additional failure data, specifically for our wind turbines. We'll talk about some minor changes that we made to help us to identify our consumable spares. And then we'll talk about some reports that we created, customized reports specific for inventory, and some enhancements that we put into Maximo for the purpose of tracking how our purchase orders are distributed when distributed for different sites. And then we'll talk about some customizations that we made on the start center of Maximo. And we'll talk about stock tools and a little bit about some of our planning scheduling approach. But in general, as you look at the map, this shows where we're at. Like I said, Duke Energy itself is the largest utility in North America. We're with Duke Energy Renewables, so our part of the organization is specifically wind farms and solar farms. So right now, as an organization, we are right around 2,500 megawatts of wind and solar. 2,100 of that is wind energy coming from wind. 400 megawatts of that is coming from solar, and those numbers are constantly being changed. We have more wind farms, more solar farms coming on the books, ready to go anytime. So, but you can see where we're at. You can see a very high population of solar farms, specifically in North Carolina. If you look at the upper part of the map up in here, you see some states that are colored in blue. We have a lot of activity in those states, but we actually operate and maintain facilities for other companies. So they're not our assets, but we're still being used for operation and maintenance for other facilities. So that's an important aspect of our business. Obviously, I mentioned 2,100 megawatts of our energy comes from wind. So what's really important to us is failures. I mean, nobody likes to have failures, but they happen. And we put some things into place within Maximo using some of the customization to help us track some of the major failures that takes place in the wind business. So as we look at the tracking failure, you can see that out of the box, Maximo is very powerful. Maximo, has an awful lot of information. But here's some of the information that we're looking for. We want to find additional information on why are gearbox failing, why are generators failure, and how often are they failing. So if you look on the screen down here in the very bottom right-hand corner, it may be difficult to read from the back, but this is a field that was populated, and it just simply says turbine balance of plant failure. And for those that are familiar with the work management system, probably very familiar with these tabs across here. But the way this works is if we have a major failure with this box down here, if somebody just simply puts a check mark in that box, when that box is checked, notice that it creates a whole new tab. And then that's very critical for us. So now we have a place to capture additional major failure information. Once you click on that tab, now we can see a lot of additional information. So the information that was originally entered on a work order is automatically carried over into this. But we also have some other very important information that's important to us to capture. For example, is this an insurance claim? We want to know the exact failure date, the date that it went back in service. The system is set up so that it automatically calculates the actual downtime. So this is very important to us. But notice we also have over here some specific components within a wind turbine. So all a person has to do is click on the magnifying glass. They get a drop down of all the major components, and that can be selected. So we have a lot of information that could be entered that's not a normal part of a work order. But if you notice down at the very bottom of the screen, down in this area, there's a field here that says additional gearbox failure. Here's one that says additional generator failure. And that allows us to be very specific on this turbine. Is it a gearbox failure? Is it a turbine failure or generator failure? So if I click on that box, in this case I click on the gearbox failure. So now we see our gearbox components. So we have basically 3 different configurations of gearboxes, and so we can see all of that information. But what's important to us is not just the pretty pictures, but it helps the technician to identify where was the failure and what is the cause of the failure. But if we notice down here, we have drop-down menus that shows who's the manufacturer of the gearbox. So all of our gearbox manufacturers are listed in the drop-down menu. But they could also list what's the model number, what's the serial number. A lot of additional information is available there. So if I go back, I'm going to go back to this screen. So on this screen, if I click the box that says generator, if I click that box, now I'm going to go advance forward. Notice up at the top of the screen, I have another new tab that you normally wouldn't see on a work order, but it specifically is pointing to generator failures. So here's a general overview picture of a generator, but we have the same information. We're able to select the model number, the serial number, specific components. So these are configurations that Projetech assisted us with. We had an idea that would help us to identify critical failures. Working with Projetech, we were able to put these into place, and it's been extremely beneficial for us. So the next aspect, obviously, if you have all this information, you want to be able to run reports. So this is just a very simple one. So every single major failure, we can run a report and run a time frame and show all of the major failures with all the critical information that's been entered on those types of work orders.
So how do we do it? It's pretty straightforward, and it's important to distinguish a customization with a system configuration. These are what I consider to be advanced configuration options in Maximo. Everything should upgrade. When Duke goes from 7.5 to 7.6, it should be a seamless transaction with everything that we've done. So these are the things we added, and Jim had a vision for it. We worked with it, we mapped it up, we laid out the screens in Excel. We did it all on paper, an easy to read format before we went to work with the system in the database. Added 4 new tabs to work order tab tracking, 1 new database object, a database table to store all the data. I added them up later, Jim, or I looked later, there's actually 60 attributes. An attribute is just a database or a field in the database. So we added 60 new fields to the database and to the screens. And then all the other domains, lookouts, value lists, all of that were part of it. Pretty standard stuff, but in the end, it was a pretty big initiative. Automation scripts to, first off, create the record in the extra table, and then also to calculate the time between the system failure and coming back online. Then most of the work was done in Application Designer, where we added fields, conditional properties, signature options, things like that. It was a nice project that worked that well.
Thank you, Mac. So moving on to the next subject is consumable spares. I know a lot of organizations obviously have inventory, but in our organization, consumable spares, we treat them a little bit different. For example, our accountants, they're not interested in all of the dollars on every work order for consumables. They want to know how much we spent for consumables for the year. But for example, if we buy $5,000 worth of consumable products, those are expensed right away. So they don't want to see those on all the work order reports. So they don't want to see those parts being issued out of the storeroom. They're considered already having been used. But for us, when we run reports out of Maximo, we truly want to know how much money are we spending on every component, every work order. How much are we really spending, including consumables? So to be a little bit creative, we made a minor customization. And if you look down here, whoops. If we look down here at the bottom of the screen, we just simply created a new field saying, is this a consumable item? The whole idea is we can now run a report for our accountants that says how many items were issued out of the storeroom at any given month, but we can also run a separate report that says how much did we really spend on all of our work orders or on all of our specific pieces of equipment, because that's the part that's important to us from a work management side. So again, it's a difference in the needs between those on the work management side and those that are counting the dollars, the accountants. The next step is, again, we're still focusing somewhat on inventory, and obviously those who use Maximo are very familiar that Maximo has a great number of inventory reports. You have issues reports, return reports, the edits reports. There's a lot of very good reports. But what we found in our organization is if we have an accountant and they say, okay, here's how much money was on the books last month. We run the report this month, and okay, so there's a difference. So how do I justify the difference? So we have to show them the edits report, we have to show the receipts report, the issues report, the transfers reports. So they have to add up all of this to make the numbers add up and figure out, do the books balance? So we try to come up with a creative way that made it more simple for us and more simple for the accountant, so they don't have to use so many different reports to figure out where the money went, or where the parts went. So if you look, this is the some of the standard information out of Maximo. It shows the cost, the quantity, what's been issued, but what we really want to focus on is this aspect. So this particular aspect, this is what we all see when we look at inventory. But on our inventory, what we call a roll forward report, the intent, for lack of a better description, the intent was almost to say, can we create a report that's almost like your checkbook? So I can look at the checkbook, and when I get a statement from the bank, it'll say, here was your balance at the end of last month, here's your balance at the end of this month, and oh, by the way, here's every check that you deposited or every check that you wrote and money came out of your account. So that was the intent of this report, is to show all of the transactions all in one single report. So we can see, looking here, we can see what site it is, what storeroom it is, and the associated dates. But more importantly, for us, we can see the beginning balance. We don't show it on here, but on ours, when you run this report, the very bottom line would show the totals. So that it would show your total balance at the beginning of the month, the total balance at the end of the month. So then if we go to the next section of this, The report also shows everything that was issued, the cost and the quantity, and then everything that was received, and then the manual edits as well. So again, this one report captures all of the critical information that the accountants want to see. So instead of looking at 5 or 6 different canned reports that come from Maximo, working with Projetech, we were able to have this report created that really puts all of that critical information into a single document. So that was one that our accountants were extremely pleased to see. The technical details, Mack will need to explain that.
It's pretty straightforward. The heavy lifting's done by the Parrott report that pings these audit tables. So every night an audit copy of all key inventory data is put in an audit table, a separate table to Maximo. The report then performs the calculations to display the differences between 2 points in time. Does the calculations, it can be on demand or scheduled. Do you get one every month, Jim, or are they scheduled?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you get a scheduled report every month, or do you just run it whenever you need to?
It runs every month.
So it's scheduled every month, shows up in somebody's inbox in Excel or PDF, how do you get it?
We get it in a PDF.
As a PDF, could be Excel as well. And then that audit data is stored permanently for the first of every month, so you can go back in time, last quarter, last year, 2 years ago, and see what your balances were in beginning and end of the month. And then daily, we keep 60 days worth of transactions, daily transactions for 60 days. Works out pretty well.
So the next topic that we're going to consider is distributed cost, and this has been a interesting learning curve for us. So when we say distributed cost, for those that are working, a while ago we were talking about inventory, then we were talking about work orders, but now more specifically is on purchase orders. So if I have a purchase order and I have a PO line, on that PO line, typically, if you make a purchase, you're charging that to one specific site. But if you're making a purchase, and we have many of our locations where there may be one storeroom supplying multiple sites, or people working at multiple sites, or we make a purchase and the cost is split against different sites or even different organizations, it was really difficult to capture that and to see that. So if we look at any given purchase order, this is what we're all used to seeing. This one field on a PR or PO line, it just says, here's your GL accounting. But if that cost is split across multiple sites, it doesn't exactly jump out at you. In fact, it's quite difficult to see. So if I go to the next screen, what we did as far as our customization is working with Projetech, what we did is we said, anytime somebody clicks on the box to distribute that cost, now that whole field is highlighted. So this field that was not highlighted a while ago, now the fact that this is highlighted, that tells me immediately, as soon as I open this purchase order, this being highlighted, it jumps out at you. Now it's telling you, you have taken this purchase and you've split the cost across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sites. Where that's important to us is we use Maximo to track all of our purchases. We have an entirely different system, our accounts payable system. And in our accounts payable system, that's where our invoices come in, that's where they get paid. Our rule is, if you split the cost on a work order or purchase order, we want to see that same cost split in our accounts payable system. But if that isn't clear here, it'll never be transported correctly into our accounts payable system. So this was a somewhat simple change. It's nothing drastic, but it's been very, very critical to the success for us, so we can see exactly how our money has been distributed across different parts of our organization.
That's the other one we did, Jim, the insurance date expiration. On the company application, the company object, the company data field is an insurance date expiration field. And they were just interested in knowing in a heartbeat if that has expired or not. So we put a condition in place that just takes a look at the current system date, compares it to the insurance expiration date of the vendor, and if it's expired, it turns the data field red on the PO, PR, or PO applications.
Yeah. Thank you. That wasn't a part of one of our original slides that was added. I caught me off guard looking at that. I was trying to figure out what I was seeing.
Do you prevent PR approval based on if their insurance is valid or not?
It will prevent it, yeah.
Is that out of the box? Or do we-
That's within the customization.
Right, right.
So this is pretty straightforward. In the application designer, it's a conditional property on those two attributes, those two data fields. Just evaluate if there are multiple GL accounts with the PO, PR line, and also if the insurance date is expired. And then they've got some wizards in Projetech helping us put together some, the right SQL script to evaluate that, and then change the color based on that condition.
And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Adam Olson. We'll consider some of the additional changes that we made. In this case, it's a significant change to our start center to help all of our technicians and our managers.
Thanks, Jim. So, introduce myself again. I'm Adam Olson. I also work with Duke Energy. Going to get into we're calling it Color My World, or adding color to the start centers. So, prior to the color being added, we did have the different start center templates. So I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that there. So we've got different templates for managers, our administrator template, our operator technician template, our planner lead, and our site admin. So you're seeing different things there based on what the role is of that individual within the organization. So, but based on that, these templates, you can all set up queries, and these different queries within these queries, it was kind of tough to see what was there from a technician point of view. Or when they were logging in, they weren't sure. They were seeing a mess of stuff there, but they weren't sure how to categorize it. They just weren't clear with maybe some of the terminology. So our idea was we're just going to simplify this. We're going to color code everything within these start centers and make it very straightforward when you log in. So for example, if I look at the open work orders for a manager down at the bottom, it might be kind of hard seeing which button do I hit for the laser on here. This red one? Okay, so right down here it says red indicates work order status of waiting on approval, waiting for scheduling, waiting for planning, waiting on plant conditions. So ultimately what we tell our people is if you see them in there in red, so you can see them in red in here, nobody started on any of these yet, or it's something that we need to evaluate, determine if we need to do it, take a look at the details, and kind of get our standing from there. And we've got orange, those would be things that we scheduled, maybe something that we put it in place on our schedule and we're ready to move forward with it, and we've got it in place there. Blue indicates in progress, so a technician is actively working on it, or we're waiting on details to be added. And then finally, green would indicate that they're complete, and for us what that means is that indicates for our managers, I can go through and now review these work orders, okay? So if I look at the next screen here, this is a little bit bigger, blown up version. We've also got the work orders I created built into the start center, open work orders again. But the work orders I created, that's based on the user's individual login. So when they log in, based on their default insert site, along with their user ID, it's going to look up any that they are the lead on, on this, any that they created. We've got another one, any that they're the lead on, but it's a way for them to just quick visually verify, these are my work orders, these are the ones I need to make sure I'm keeping track of. So it's been a big benefit. It's helped the sites to be able to keep track of what's going on a daily basis and actually get these complete work orders. It's a way for the managers to know they need to go review them. Ultimately, it's been a really good customization. So I'll let Mack give nothing more on that.
It's display options and setting up the results. You don't even have to know the hexadecimal color code.
So the next piece is the stock tool management. So tool management, we previously used, I wanted to say it was TC Max was the software that we used to manage our tools and incoming, outgoing, where they're at, who has these tools, what's the calibration status of them. what's the repair history, where we've used them, all that information. So that's benefits to tracking your tools. We did it at a very high level, down to, you know, an open-end 8mm wrench. So from a Maximo standpoint, there's a great deal of effort that goes into this. It does require one person creating, maintaining, doing the transactional data, you know, doing the day-to-day maintenance, keeping this up to date. So the real big push on this, or what we kind of want to outline, is ultimately the focus on this would be high-value things, your calibrated tooling, your vibra lines, high torque pumps, tension heads, things like that, where the calibration of that specific asset could prove to be something that you want to take your old information, see where you've used that asset on. Say you came back with a bad calibration, you need to see where you used it and mitigate some issues. So the process for setting this up, we create master data, tool record. So it's called it's just like the inventory module. Instead of the item master, it's the tool master. So you set that up as its own individual tool record. So that tool is your master tool listing. That moves into the stock tool, which the stock tool is much like the inventory record, individual site-based. Then we can go from there, and you've got, at the tool level, you set up rotating assets. So an individual tool number can be assigned with rotating assets, is how they're defined in Maximo, and those rotating assets are linked to your tool number, which is how you can see what you have in a specific storeroom. And from there you can assign PMs, track its location transactionally, put PMs to it, job plans, everything along with that. The additional thing that you do with this, we create transactions. So we purchase using tool numbers, we transfer things between sites using tool numbers, we're able to assign to the work orders using tool numbers, and we're also able to track calibration and certification history using work orders associated to those rotating assets. So just kind of a quick overview. This is that tool record. We do call it the tool MRO master. That was part of our consumable effort that we kind of renamed it. So Projetech renamed it for us here. But tool record, you start in your tool tab and you're going to see an individual tool number here, and it's really small. Can't see it up here, but it's 600-167, I believe is what that says. And we've got here what kits we use it in, the last price we paid for it. You can associate image data with it, so you could say, you know, this is a Stall-Willie 730 torque wrench. There's an image of it for reference point. So that tool record ties into the stock tool. So this is that same Stall-Willie 730-20. In this case, it's in the Laurel Hill tooling storeroom. So this is down to the site level now. We went from the master level to the site level, and we can see in that site how many of those we have. Ultimately, if you look back here though, we have 23 different sites that have that 600-167 tool number, which is for that torque wrench. These are our different storerooms that we use to identify where we have them, and then you can say what's the balance on hand for that specific tool at that location. To dig in a little bit deeper than that, if you go into an individual site at the rotating tool asset level is where you see the individual tool. So these would be the 6-digit numbers we assign to those individual torque wrenches themselves. From there, this would be that asset record. So this is one of those assets. We're able to capture the model information, the serial number information, location where it's at, its rotating item number that it's associated with. And then at this level is where we take our certifications. So we have a calibration record that we attach to this tool, so that at any point in time we can bring up the calibration records from that tool, provide them to, as Jim noted, we have external customers that sometimes we may need to provide this for. And then we associate the PMs to this as well. So we kind of did something a little different with PMs, is we smart number them, but we use our asset numbers to number our PMs. So PM 117325 is for the asset 117325, which is the annual certification of that Stall-Willie torque wrench. That is all tied to reports that Projetech built for us that are customizable for us to search by site, storeroom, date range to know what's going to be due for calibration, what's expired, what's upcoming in the next 60, 90 days. You know, however you want to run that query, we're able to do that. And then this is a view of those tools being used on a work order. So within the actuals tab, tools tab, you're able to add with the tool number, and then see here on, this is a report that we have set up to show this was the tool, these were the tools that were used on this specific work order. This was the calibration due date of that specific asset when it was used. So then you can align that with showing we truly did use tools that were calibrated.
I might have missed it. Are you doing the calibrations inside maximo?
Yep, we're doing the calibration.
The scheduling.
The scheduling of them we're doing with the PMs right here.
The calibration data.
They're not the date sheets, the calibration. Okay, I'm not using the column.
No. So inventory usage is how we're making the transactions from site to site. We're saying it moved from, say, our Canby tool crib location to our Laurel Hill wind farm when our MST goes out there to work on it. So we just transfer them using that inventory usage. It's a good way to keep track of where things are. Here's an example of tooling that came back from Laurel Hill that was out of calibration. So we'd make a request to the Laurel Hill site, and they'd send us their tools back that were out of calibration. We'd send them tools in turn that were calibrated. Next topic for us is planning the plan, PM, and job plan numbering. So what we put in place was for our EHS PMs and our standard job plans was just a policy and procedure to use smart numbering and within the PMs and within the job plans as far as their IDs go. What we're finding is we had multiple sites that had ultimately the same requirements, but they were all doing a little bit different list of inspections, and we needed a way to standardize it and format it so we could see that everybody's on the same format, which ones were being completed, who's doing them with the right intervals, and which ones we needed to add. So what we did is we created a procedure for this to outline this based on our smart numbering, and then the job plans are all shared within one organization. So if you take a look here, again, really hard to see. I'm hoping you guys will get these presentations. They'll be getting the presentations or not?
Yeah, there will be available.
Okay, so this will be a little bit easier to see that then for you. But if you take a look, what this is, these are our job plans for our standard EHS activities. We've got 40 different job plans set up with a naming convention that we put in place that starts with the interval followed by a description of what it is, and then again the description of that task. We set durations based on giving them, say if it's an annual task or a monthly task, we're going to give you from the first day of the month to the last day of the month to complete that task. From there, we associate them within the organization. We have 3 different organizations set up, so we did have to make these within each org. Then we go to the preventive maintenance. We took that same naming convention. We set up the PMs within each individual site with that same name as we had on the job plan. It's very easy to say that in this case, if I'm going to do annual EHS training completion check, and then I go back to here, I'm able to find that same annual EHS training check within here based on the same name, and then search just, in this case, I went with the monthly AED inspection for each site. I put in the PM number of monthly AED inspection. I take a look, and there's all our AED inspections for all of our wind assets. It's just quick and easy for me to review for compliance reasons. So that's a piece that we put in, and we're looking to continue to grow it with. One place where this really works well is we've got multiple sites, a lot of times using the same resources from an internal perspective or a asset support structure, and having it standardized from the top down rather than each site making these job plans at their own level and building back up to the main level. We were finding that it was hard to keep track of who was completing what and what the true list of standard inspections was. And that is all we've got. So,
Yeah, I got some questions.
Okay, I just wanted to point out a couple of, to me, they're critical points that I failed to mention at the very beginning. I did mention that as Duke Energy Renewables, we do have 2,500 megawatts across the nation between wind and solar. But with wind and farms and solar farms, you know, oftentimes those are not huge facilities like with some manufacturing facilities or some large power plants. most of these facilities are considered, they may take a lot of acreage, but the number of people is small. So what's important to us is we currently, Duke Energy, since 2007, has invested just under $5 billion, currently at $4.9 billion just in renewables energy, with a commitment to continue to grow. We currently, within Maximo, we have 87 different sites. We have 3 more that are ready this week. So we're constantly adding more and more sites. So for us, the emphasis is not just on how fast can we grow, but some of the things that we presented today is some of the customizations that Projetech was able to help us with, because for us to be able to grow and really be able to track our failures, for us to be able to track where are all of our tools, because one tool could be in Colorado 1 month and it may be in Texas the next month, and if it needs to be calibrated, it's got to be brought in. So it's critical for us to know where all of our tools are, where all of our people are that are mobile. It's important for us to know how much are we really spending at each site. But without these customizations, Maximo is an awesome, powerful tool. There's many fields that'll tell us everything that we need. But some of the customizations that Projetech has been able to help us with has made our life much, much easier. We have, like I said, currently have 87 sites. We don't have this massive IT support team as far as building the solar, or as far as building the equipment hierarchy for the sites, doing all the training, being the IT help desk. This is it. It's 2 of us. So it's not this huge team, but we're still trying to manage a lot of facilities, a lot of tools, a lot of inventory, and a lot of moving pieces. So these tools have proved to be just outstanding for us, and we appreciate Projetech's help with that. Somebody had a question.
Actually, got nothing for you real quick. The diagrams that you used in there, when you clicked to add something additional, you had it pop up a dialog for, like, was it a gearbox failure? You had it pop up a gearbox, right? Did it do a generic one, or was that gearbox, that diagram associated with that asset?
So what we did when we created those fields, for example, in the gearbox, with our technologies in different gearboxes, we took all of the different gearbox component structure, and we took all of those and put them on that field. So those, of all of our technologies, the component structure, that's all of them.
Okay,
So
it's
those
not
are,
specific to the
so those
asset.
are real.
Okay,
See,
it's not
I think
specific
it's-
to that asset, it's just one generic that shows everything.
I believe it's
It
a
is,
single
so they can
stage and a
pick.
dual stage. They're just generic, you know.
Okay. Second, real quick, on your checkbook thing, that was really good, but does it just use inventory parts, or does it use things that are purchased through POs, PRs, individual, you know what I'm saying? There's different ways to acquire things and pay for them through Maximo. Was it just inventory parts, or was it a collective everything I spend?
No, for us, I understand your question. It's a good question. For us, that specific report was created solely to track all of the inventory. So all of the inventory that was received in, issued out, transferred from site to site, we wanted to know where all of our inventory was on one report. So it was just inventory only on that one.
Storeroom specific, you had to select the storeroom.
Okay, and then the last question real quick on the tools. Maximo has this inherent problem where I can only check out a tool for one work order at a time. And I imagine when you go out on a turbine or out in the field, it's not uncommon for our guys to have use things on multiple jobs, multiple work orders at one time. Maximo won't let you do that. Do you have that problem? If so, did you work around it? What are you doing?
We haven't. For us, we're not associate planning that tool. We're actually just showing its usage. So it's after the fact most of the time that's getting reported, which
So
tools were
you
used.
don't issue the tool to the work order and go do the work, you do it after the fact?
Right.
Okay, thanks.
How many active users do you have, and how many tradesmen?
Our current number of active users, I believe, is 268 active users. And we're using a combination of authorized and limited licenses. By far the majority are authorized licenses.
I was interested in the color coding for status. How can you do that locally rather than each stat center at a time? You said something about results set?
Yeah. So For that, what we did is each of our employees, based on their role, has a security group assigned, and that template is set up based on that security group. So what we did is we did it at the security group level where, say I'm a site manager and that's the template I have, and that's the template I'm always gonna see. What we did is everyone who's a manager has that template assigned to them, and therefore that query is just built to suit for them. They could customize it if they wanted to, but it's really, you know, we're gonna give you the basic level of what we think you need, and you can add to it from there.
You talk about splitting the cost of inventory across the site, across the organization, right?
Yes.
Where are you storing that information? Because, inventory usage allows you storing only per site. So how do you split and, where do you store that information?
If I'm gonna make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. So if I write a purchase order and I just distribute the cost, where is that cost being stored?
Or you say, let's say this was site A and site B, right? You say you go across multiple sites or no?
Yes, okay, I think I understand what you're saying. It's actually kind of stored in two different places. One would be what we call our accounts payable system. So when an invoice is paid, each line has its own GL accounting, so it could be tracked there. But also within Maximo, we created a report that shows all of the details on every PO line. So every purchase order, if it has one line or 20 lines, we have a report that shows the PO lines and all the details associated with that. So we can see the GL accounting distribution in two different places. Yes?
So when you pull that purchase order into your accounts payable software, it automatically generates more than one line based on how many accounts?
No.
Account numbers are, no?
No. Because of the way our organization is structured, we don't export any data from Maximo into another system. And that's just because of Duke Energy with security, cyber security.
Okay.
So at this point in time, we import data, but we don't, at this point in time, that very well could change, but at this point in time, we don't export any of the data.
Oh, so your accounts payable software doesn't pull data from Maximo?
That's correct.
Okay.
It's fed into two separate systems.
It is? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
But, so for 281 licenses, how many people are represented in renewables? Like 3,000 people in renewables or 5,000? How much? It's a bigger organization.
No, it's closer to probably 450.
So, okay, do you use like a Projetech work request portal, or only 281 people could actually put in a corrective maintenance?
No, everybody in our organization, if they have a license, all of them can create a work order. All of them could create a purchase requisition.
I think
But
that's
only
too hard to
281
difference
of the
between those
4,000.
licenses and the total number of people. If I don't have a license, can I put in a work order?
No, yes, if a person doesn't have a license, they can't put in a work order.
Yeah, they don't use the maintenance portal.
So we do have a large number of people who have labor records where their labor can be entered on work orders, but they may not necessarily have a user's license where they can log in and create a work order and enter that information themselves. Yes?
And again, I missed the front part of your presentation, but this is all hosted, right? This is all an offering that's in the cloud, or you run it on your iron on your side of the firewall, or is it in the cloud?
Matt, you might be better qualified to answer that.
Okay.
But it does all go through the Duke firewall, if that's what you're asking. But obviously we can work, it's web-based, obviously we could work offline without going through the firewall. Yes?
We're one of the first, I implemented the first site that's no longer Duke, but at that time it was Duke in 1999. We were doing cloud for these guys before cloud was Duke.
Wow, that's great.
You invented it. I got that there.
On the failure report that you have, who uses it and what do they do with it?
The failure report, who uses it is pretty much any technician who's on a work order. If they identify that as a major failure, and we have a document with process and procedure, but the process identifies what is considered a major failure. If it's considered a major failure, all they do is put the check in that one little box that I identified, and then a new tab comes up, and then all of that additional information could be entered there. So from there, we run a report every single month that shows all of our major failures. And then we have a whole nother team, we call it the Operational Excellence Team. It's an engineering group. They take that data and look at all of our major failures. And we use a lot of that information to help predict future failures, so we have a good understanding of what critical spares do we need, how many do we need, and where do we need them. And a lot of that is simply based on those critical failures.
You see sometimes you have two reasons for failure, right? An asset is failed, but there are not only one major reason, there could be 2 or 3 reasons. Do you ever have a need to report multiple failure codes?
So this actually does have primary and secondary damage locations that you can report on against. So you can have your.
Custom, is the custom one?
What's that?
Is it custom act? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any problems when you check that to say it's a major failure or whatever it is that requires that? Now you're creating another MBO set. Do you have any problems syncing that back to the original one, so your work order has a hard time syncing in the session to having a new child?
No, it all carries over into the same work order. In fact, what we found is we've had some guys, just out of curiosity, say, I think this is a critical failure. Put a check in that box, a new tab comes up with all this new information. They could fill all of that out and then realize later, oh, that wasn't a critical failure. All they got to do is go back to the front page of the work order, remove that check mark, and all of that data that was entered is all removed. So it's a very simple, it's a tremendous amount of data, but it's very simple to add new data. But if human error takes place, it's very easy to remove it all, just one click, and it's all removed.
Is that status quo on that check mark? So in other words, if you go from field complete to completed work order and closed, the check mark, at what point can they edit that?
At any time, as long as any time up until it's closed.
Okay.
Or prior to being closed.
Okay, we're actually running over just a little bit. So we'll make sure you guys have time to get lunch before we get some other sessions going on. Lunch is going to be back out in the atrium by all the vendors and everything. I'm sure if you run into Adam, Jim, or Mack and have additional questions, they'll be happy to answer that for you. As well as any of the Green Lantern Projetech people. Just about any of us can answer some of the questions about the customizations we offer and things like that. So have a good day. Sounds really good.